When I struggle with perfectionism, what really helps me is the phrase that I've learned in my procrastination program. An imperfect dream is better than a perfect nightmare. And that's why I'm here again. And that's why I am ready to make another video. Welcome to Self-Talk Body Soul channel, where we talk all things spirituality, growth mindset, personal development and mental health. Last time we talked about daily planning and the importance of it and how you can implement it into your life with your specific circumstances and your specific needs. And we briefly discussed why it is hard to stick to planning sometimes, and the reasons for that are distraction, procrastination. In my case, as well as the case of a lot of people around the world nowadays, it's also ADD. And today I want to talk about these three things: procrastination, distraction and ADD. I will potentially go more in depth into these things in later videos, but today I just briefly want to talk about all three of them. And you might be wondering, what do all three of these have in common? Well, first of all, a clear and very significant symptom of ADD is actually getting distracted a lot. And the same goes for procrastination. When you procrastinate, the reason why it happens is because you get distracted from the important task and you start doing the non-important. So these three things have a lot in common, but until I've actually started learning more about each of these individual things, I didn't realize that they kind of all stem from the same problem. After reading certain books and doing certain courses online to do with these subjects, I kind of started seeing the problem of ADD as a severe form of distraction and procrastination. ADD is a problem of development of the prefrontal cortex, so that's good news, because I think most people see it as something that is wrong with them and like a pathology, but it's just not the case. It's actually something that you can stimulate and develop further. That's how I started seeing ADD, and it's been really helpful, of course, because it's a more severe form rather than just a casual procrastination habit. It does require slightly different approaches, but what I found is the cause for all three of them, they have multiple causes, multiple things that play part, but the key factor is actually shame. If you have ADD, I would highly recommend reading a book called Scattered Minds by Gabor. I will link it down below as well. He talks a lot about shame and childhood trauma in general. His work is surrounding that. He's got, 50 plus years of practice and experience. In his book Scattered Minds, he specifically talks about ADD. One second. I will pull out my notes for this. I listened to it in the form of an audiobook, and I wrote this quote out to do with shame. He said, "Shame isn't caused by the outside world. It is provoked and enlarged by it. However, the reason why shame becomes a part of a person's state of being is because the feeling of shame bypasses the regulation of the cortex. It is due to underdevelopment of the cortex." And another thing that he mentioned to do with shame is people with ADD apologize too often, even for things they haven't done or something that they think they've done wrong, but in fact it's not. This is also due to shame. This is quite deep stuff, I understand that, but I think it's important to talk about this. In the scope of this video, I think that these two things is all I want to mention. There is so much in this book. I highly recommend it, and I know that technically to say that you have ADD, you need to go to a psychiatrist, and not even psychologist, a psychiatrist, and they need to diagnose you. However, Gabor in his book, in the beginning he listed typical symptoms of ADD, and he said if you identify any or all of these symptoms in you and they diminish the quality of your life, they impede the quality of your life and your everyday functioning, that means you have ADD. And I totally agree with this. The reason why I started reading this book is because in the summer, so about half a year ago, I really started noticing really heavy effects it was having on my life, this distractedness. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? And then, you know, by serendipity of some kind, I started noticing videos online about ADD. And I started listening to them and I was like, oh, that really sounds like what I do. But it still didn't click that maybe I do have ADD, you know. It was just like, oh yeah, I do this thing. And it didn't click until I started reading this book that I probably do have ADD, and then I realized I had it all my life. If you read this book and you identify that some of these things apply to you, you can then use the tools that he gives in the book to actually help yourself. That's to do with ADD. Now, going back to distractedness and procrastination, how does that relate to shame? Why are we afraid to start on achieving our goals? Why are we afraid to start on a task that might be difficult? Because we are afraid to fail. We are afraid that we will fall below certain standards that either we set for ourselves or other people set upon us. And so in our minds, it is just easier not to even start at all, because we would rather not face this painful feeling of embarrassment and feeling like failure. But unfortunately, this has very negative repercussions, because sometimes, or rather most of the times, when you want to achieve something in your life that perhaps you've never done before, you have to go into the unknown. And for the brain, it's such a scary territory, and there may be a lot of things related to the story of shame that you have in your mind. Maybe in the past you've seen someone fail and they were shamed so much for it, or you had that experience in your past yourself. It doesn't have to be anything majorly traumatic, but it can be something from your childhood that you've experienced that made you think as a child that you are being shamed for whatever it is. So the problem of self-expression really comes into this whole topic of distraction and procrastination and ADD, which is what shame is. We're scared to express ourselves, we're scared to put ourselves out there because we think we are not enough. This has been such a revelation for me because, you know, even to do with this YouTube channel, whenever I sat down and I tried to make a YouTube video in the past, the things that were happening in my head, I'm not even going to talk to you about them, but they were pretty dark. You know, the type of self-talk I had towards myself, it was just, yeah, I wouldn't even talk like that to, well, even to the people I don't like particularly, you know, but I did talk like that to myself, and that was pretty sad. And there's many tools in which you can address that, and I highly recommend unpacking this subject for yourself. If you struggle with procrastination and distraction and ADD specifically, I would really try to move towards resolving that. Maybe get some therapy, maybe read some books on it, watch some videos with people who can talk through to you about it. Hopefully I can be one of these people. And if you do want me to talk about this, please let me know in the comments below. If you relate to this information, please let me know as well. We can always communicate, and it would be nice to create a little community on this channel of where we can talk about our own experiences and specifically talk about how we manage these experiences, right? Because we don't want to become a complaint channel. We want to actually talk about how to get better, but first step to doing that is recognizing that we have whatever it is that we need to resolve. Again, there's so much more to unpack in these three topics, but that is the thing that really struck me as the common reason for all three of them. What are the ways in which you can manage it? One of them we've discussed in the last video. It's actually daily planning. When you have a daily plan, you have a clear idea of what it is that you need to do, and that is really helpful when it comes to doing the task and the self-talk in your mind starts going in the negative direction, and you start telling yourself, you know, that, oh, you're not going to be good at this, why bother, or you've never been able to do this in the past, why do you think you can do this now? Oh, well, to-do lists are not to-do list planning is not for me. when this self-talk starts appearing, you have at least something to back you up. You have this plan that you've written for yourself, and you can always refer back to it and just get back on track. But if you don't even have a plan, you're just in the stratosphere of like, I don't know what I'm doing. So daily plan really helps to sort of organize your brain. And in the workshop on distraction, that is the thing that we primarily talked about as well, how to daily plan and how to commit to that plan. And the same goes for ADD, really. When you plan something and you achieve the things that you've planned, it really boosts your self-confidence. That is the part that helps you develop that part of the brain that can deal with feelings of shame and anxiety and etc. The other important thing, and it also is to do with shame, but it can also be to do with other negative feelings. And that is something that is actually was mentioned in the distraction course. I really love this quote. I did write it out. Time management requires pain management, and that is very, very relevant. So when we manage our time and when we try to stick to routines, especially if we're not used to it, we're going to face a lot of our own demons. We're going to face a lot of our negative emotions, and they are the thing that we call pain. And to manage our time, to manage our resources, to manage our daily planning, we need to be able to manage our pain. So when you sit down and you try to work, you're going to get distracted a lot instantly if you have any of these three problems. Why does that happen? Because the brain becomes very uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable maybe in the setting altogether. Maybe it is uncomfortable with certain emotions that arise. Maybe you start feeling anxious. Maybe you start feeling lethargic. All of these things, they happen because of underlying self-talk that we have going on in our minds. I was always the person that whenever I had to deal with negative emotions, I'd just push them aside. I push them aside and I just crack on with whatever I need to do. And frankly, that helped me achieve a lot in my life, especially in school and in university. I was always kind of known as a high achiever. But in the last 2 years, since I started my spiritual journey, and by the way, oh my God, I wrote out a list the other day, and that's not to brag, but it's actually to give some credibility to myself. In the last 2.5 years, there hasn't been a single month in the whole 2.5 years where I didn't. Most months I have done some kind of paid course. Other months I have done unpaid workshops and courses online, and the rest of the time, in the meantime rather, I'd also just read tons of books. I think I must have read and listened to about at least 50 books in the last 2.5 years, specifically on self-development and mental health and health in general, etc. And I was really amazed by that. So I've grown quite a lot in terms of my understanding of my inner problems. And what it did for me is, of course, as a result, it unpacked a lot of that inner conversation and inner shame and inner anxiety and depression and all of that. And it sort of like came to the surface, and I had to deal with that a lot. And so it kind of became a reverse, right? Before, when I would just push aside all these like negative thoughts and patterns in my brain, I was actually able to achieve things because I would just ignore the negativity. Then I allowed all this negativity to come up so that I could look at it and see where it's coming from and actually deal with it, so that I could have a chance to not have to stop this background noise of self-deprecation. But what happened as a result of that is that now whenever I try to do something in my life, this negative talk just comes up straight away like that. And that's when my ADD kind of became really bad in the last 2.5 years, because the second I want to do something that before I would be able to just do, now it requires me to sit through that negative emotion, and most of the time it doesn't actually help me anymore. to achieve the things that I want to achieve. So what I realized has been helpful for me is to set aside a time in your day or in your week when you maybe go into meditation, or maybe you go to a therapy session, or you just sit and do some journaling. Write out all the things that are negative in your mind about yourself. So if you notice that you have some kind of underlying anxiety in your life, everyday life, maybe you can write out what are the thoughts associated with that anxiety, what are the feelings associated with that anxiety, what experiences in the past maybe have caused you to feel that anxiety. And you can do the same in your meditation or with a therapist, whichever one you prefer. But it is so important to sit down with those emotions, acknowledge them and sit with them and understand where they came from and give them space to be. Because the reason why they come up again and again and again is because they want your attention, and until you give it your attention, it's not going to go away. It's just not. As much as you can push it away, things in your life will start crumbling until you have no other chance, no other option but to look at it. And so I highly recommend taking the time to sit down with your pain and talk to it, because it probably has a lot of useful information for you on how you can move forward in your life. To actually set aside a time when you say, right now I'm gonna go and be with myself, with my inner child, if you like, if you don't understand the notion of inner child, or just with my thoughts and my feelings, what it is that is happening inside of me. And when you do that, when it comes to the time of actually doing things, like, attaining tasks, because you've worked with your inner state of being already, and you can refer to it when you actually have to do something now proactive. So if you've done your inner work and then you sit down and you need to study or do some work on your business or whatever it is, and this feeling of like distractedness comes up again, you can sit with yourself and you can say, right now is the time to work. We have the time when we deal with our emotions. Right now is the time to actually work. And it really actually works, because your brain understands that you're not just pushing your feelings aside, you just compartmentalize these things. Right now the time is to study. Right now is the time is to work. Right now the time is to eat. Right now the time is to sit with my pain. And when you actually give everything that you need to do in your life a specific timeline and a time period and a timetable that you have in your diary, your brain feels safer in that space. It needs a routine. And so when you give it that routine and you give it that safety of, don't worry, I'm not just pushing you aside, it's just that right now the time is to work and I can deal with my emotions later, it actually listens to you. But you really do need to give yourself that time to grieve and that time to be in pain and shame, whatever it is that you feel. That's been my way of kind of dealing with it when it came to sitting down and doing the thing that I have to do. I hope this hasn't been too heavy on you guys, but I thought that was a really important part of the conversation that needs to be had. If you struggle with any of these things, like such as distraction, procrastination, or ADD, perhaps there are other things that actually relate to this. Maybe you can let me know in the comments below if you recognize something or other that relates to this. But yeah, it makes you wonder why nowadays we have such a high number of people with ADD, and it kind of makes sense when you think about social media and how that relates to the topic of shame and the amount of time we spend on social media comparing ourselves to everyone else who seems to have better lives and better hobbies and better jobs, and it makes us feel not enough and inadequate and irrelevant. It lowers your self-esteem and confidence in who you are. And so I definitely noticed from my own experience and also experience of many people around me who have had big breaks from social media and from the phones in general, and they all say the same thing, and that is that they felt so much better when they were not on social media. They could focus on their life, imminent life, here and now, and with the people that are actually around them, not online. And it really makes a difference. So if you do struggle with distractedness and ADD, phone can be a big problem. It is not the culprit, but it is a magnifier. That's it for now. I really hope this wasn't too heavy, but rather good food for thought and useful to you in some way. Please let me know in the comments below if it was, and maybe there is something you would like to ask, anything at all. Please let me know in the comments below. You can also find me on social media and message me directly. Talking about social media, now I'm saying go on social media. Please consider subscribing and liking this video if it was useful to you. This is a journey for me to kind of give back the information that I've learned in a more concise form to give you as much value as possible. Thank you so much again, and I will see you in the next video.